My father-in-law looked me dead in the eyes as my baby's cry pierced the air after hitting the wall. "Accidents happen to bad mothers' kids," he said, while my husband just stood there frozen. "I'm Bethany, and what happened at Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago destroyed my family in ways I never imagined possible. But it also revealed truths that had been buried for decades. Picture this: a beautiful dining room table set with china that's been in the family for 40 years. The smell of turkey and stuffing filling the air, 3 generations gathered together, and an 8-month-old baby being thrown against a wall by his own grandfather while everyone watched. My baby Theo was the youngest one there that day, just 8 months old, still in that phase where he grabbed everything and smiled at everyone. My older son Colton, 7 years old, quiet kid, always watching, always listening. He's the one who ended up saying what every adult in that room was too scared to say. My husband Wade worked at the hardware store downtown, managed the paint department. Good man, I thought. Weak man, I learned. His father Gordon had trained him well to never speak up, never resist, never protect. Gordon himself was 62 years old, built like a brick wall even in retirement. 20 years in the Marines, another 20 with the Postal Service. The kind of man who thought fear and respect were the same thing. His wife Francine, she'd perfected the art of looking the other way, 59 years old and still pretending her husband was just strict. Then there was Danny, Wade's younger brother, 29 and drowning himself in bourbon every chance he got. That day I finally learned why. His sister Roxanne, 36, divorced, raising her daughter Meredith alone. She had this way of going completely still whenever Gordon raised his voice, like a rabbit hoping the hawk won't notice. Everyone in that room had a role to play in Gordon's twisted kingdom. Everyone had learned their place. Everyone except me, apparently. And definitely except my baby, whose only crime was being a normal 8-month-old who knocked over a glass of juice. What you need to understand is that this wasn't a sudden explosion. This was years of violence dressed up as discipline. Years of bruises explained away as accidents. Years of a family so broken they couldn't even see the pieces anymore. But sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see what's really happening. Sometimes it takes a child's innocent observation to shatter the silence everyone's been maintaining. My name is Bethany, and this is the story of the Thanksgiving that ended with police sirens instead of pumpkin pie. The day my 7-year-old son exposed a family secret that had been destroying lives for generations. The day I learned that protecting your children sometimes means burning every bridge behind you. And it all started with spilled cranberry juice on a white tablecloth. I'd been married to Wade for 9 years, and every Thanksgiving at his parents' house in Ridgemont felt like walking through a minefield. You know that feeling when you enter a room and the air itself feels hostile? That was Gordon's house. Even the family photos on the walls seemed to watch you, judging whether you belonged. That morning started like every other holiday morning in our house. I was up at 6, getting Theo changed and fed while Wade slept in. The baby had been teething for weeks, which meant nobody in our house had gotten a full night's sleep since October. I dressed him in this adorable turkey onesie my mother had sent from Florida, complete with little feathers on the bottom. He looked perfect, even with the drool constantly running down his chin. Colton was already awake, sitting at our kitchen table with his Pokemon cards spread out. "Mom, can I bring these to show Cousin Meredith?" he asked. "Sure, sweetheart, but keep them in your pocket during dinner." He nodded, then looked up at me with those serious brown eyes. "Mom, why does Grandpa Gordon always look angry? Even when he's smiling, he looks mad." Kids notice everything, don't they? I set Theo in his bouncer and sat down next to Colton. "That's just his way, sweetheart. Some people have a hard time showing happy feelings." "Dad gets quiet when we go there," Colton continued, carefully organizing his cards. "He talks different, smaller." Out of the mouths of babes, Wade did change around his father, my husband, who could joke with customers all day at the hardware store, who sang in the shower and did silly dances to make Theo laugh, became this shrunk-down version of himself the moment we pulled into his parents' driveway. Wade finally emerged from the bedroom around 8, already dressed in the polo shirt and khakis his mother expected. "You got Theo ready? Good. We should leave by noon to get there on time." "Wade, maybe we should talk to your dad about being gentler with the kids. Last time he grabbed Colton's arm pretty hard when he was running in the house." Wade's jaw tightened. Just don't contradict him about politics, okay, Beth? You know how he gets. And don't bring up Danny's drinking, or Roxanne's divorce, or anything about the military. Just keep it simple. The list of forbidden topics grew every year. I watched my husband's hands shake slightly as he poured his coffee. Wade, are you okay? I'm fine. Just let's get through this day. Mom's been cooking for 3 days. She really wants it to be nice. The drive to Ridgemont took 40 minutes. Colton played with his game system in the back while Theo dozed in his car seat. Wade's knuckles were white on the steering wheel the entire time. He kept adjusting the radio, checking the mirrors, drumming his fingers on the gear shift. "Remember," Wade said as we pulled up to the 2-story colonial house, "Dad likes to say grace. Don't start eating until he's done. And if he starts talking about his service years, just nod and listen." The house smelled like sage and butter when we arrived, those familiar holiday scents that should mean comfort but somehow felt like a warning here. Francine greeted us at the door, her gray hair perfectly styled, her smile stretched tight across her face. "Bethany, you look tired," she said, her eyes scanning me up and down. "Is the baby keeping you up? You really should try the cry-it-out method. Gordon never tolerated fussing when our kids were small." Before I could respond, Gordon's voice boomed from the living room. "About time you showed up, Wade. Danny's been here helping since noon. Real men know how to be punctual." Wade's shoulders immediately hunched forward. "Sorry, Dad. Traffic was heavy." There was no traffic. We both knew it. Inside, Danny was already slumped in the leather recliner, a beer in hand and 2 empty bottles on the side table. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. At 29, he looked 40. Roxanne was in the dining room, setting the table with mechanical precision, every fork exactly parallel, every napkin folded into perfect triangles. Her daughter Meredith, 11 years old, helped silently. "Hey, Meredith," Colton said hopefully, pulling out his Pokemon cards. "Not now," Roxanne said sharply. "We're working." Gordon appeared in the doorway, all 6'2" of him, still built like the Marine he'd been 40 years ago. His gray eyes swept over us like we were new recruits failing inspection. "Wade, you've gained weight. Bethany, that baby better not scream through dinner like last time. Colton, stand up straight when I'm looking at you." And just like that, the stage was set. Another Thanksgiving in the Patterson house, where love came with conditions and family meant fear. Dinner started at exactly 2 o'clock. Gordon insisted on military precision in everything, including meal times. We all took our assigned seats around the dining room table, the same places we'd sat for 9 years, Gordon at the head, naturally, Francine at the opposite end, closest to the kitchen for easy serving. Wade to his father's right, me next to Wade, with Theo's high chair between us, Danny across from Wade, already on his 5th beer. Roxanne and Meredith filled the remaining chairs, both sitting with perfect posture. Gordon's traditional toast began the meal. He stood, his water glass raised, and launched into his usual speech. Another year, another Thanksgiving in the greatest country on earth, a country built by real men who understood discipline, sacrifice, and strength. Not like today's generation of whiners and victims. Wade murmured agreement. Danny took another swig of beer. I focused on cutting turkey into small pieces for Colton, while bouncing Theo gently with my other hand. The baby had been fussy all day, those new teeth making him miserable. "When I was in Vietnam," Gordon continued, because somehow every conversation led back to Vietnam, we didn't have safe spaces or trigger warnings. We had reality, and we dealt with it like men. "The turkey is perfect, Mom," Roxanne said, her voice deliberately bright, trying to redirect the conversation. Francine beamed at the compliment, but Gordon wasn't finished. "That's because your mother understands her role. She doesn't try to be something she's not, unlike these modern women who think they can have it all." His eyes landed on me. I was the only woman at the table who worked outside the home. My job as an elementary school nurse apparently threatened his entire worldview. "Being a school nurse is important work," I said quietly, spooning mashed potatoes onto Colton's plate. "Babysitting kids with fake tummy aches?" Gordon scoffed. "That's not work. That's what mothers should do naturally without getting paid for it." Wade's hand found my knee under the table, a warning squeeze. Theo chose that moment to start crying harder, reaching for me while arching his back in the high chair. "Can't you keep that baby quiet?" Gordon snapped, his fork clattering against his plate. In my day, children knew their place. They didn't interrupt adult meals. "He's just a baby, Gordon," I said, lifting Theo out of his chair to comfort him. "He's teething. He's in pain." "Pain? You want to talk about pain? Try taking shrapnel in your shoulder while watching your buddy bleed out in a rice paddy. That's pain, not some baby crying over nothing." Danny laughed, but it was bitter, hollow. "Everything's Vietnam with you, Dad. Every single conversation." "You got something to say, boy?" Gordon turned on his younger son. "At least I served my country. What have you done besides pickle your liver?" "Gordon, please," Francine said softly. "It's Thanksgiving." "And I'm thankful I raised my children with discipline," Gordon shot back. "Even if one of them turned out to be a drunk and the other married a woman who can't control a baby." Theo was reaching for my face, his little hands grabbing at my nose, my glasses, anything he could reach. That's when it happened. His flailing arm knocked over my glass of cranberry juice. The deep red liquid spread across Francine's pristine white tablecloth like blood, seeping into the fabric, pooling around the silver candlesticks. The silence was immediate and suffocating. "Jesus Christ!" Gordon exploded, standing so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound made everyone flinch. "This is exactly what I mean. No discipline, no control. Look at this mess." "It was an accident," I said, grabbing napkins with my free hand while still holding Theo. "I'm sorry, Francine. I'll clean it up." "You'll do more than that," Gordon said, moving around the table toward me. "Give me the baby." "What?" I instinctively held Theo tighter. "No, he's fine. He didn't mean to. I said give me the baby." Gordon's voice dropped to that dangerous, quiet tone that made Wade go pale. "Someone needs to teach you how to handle a child properly." Wade finally spoke up, though his voice was weak. "Dad, come on, it's just juice. Mom has other tablecloths." "Shut your mouth, Wade." Gordon's face was turning that familiar shade of red, the vein in his temple pulsing. 40 years in this house and my children knew better than to make these messes. This is what happens when mothers work instead of raising their children." He reached for Theo, his large hands extending toward my baby. "Please, Gordon, just let me clean up the mess. I'll take Theo to the other room until he calms down." "You'll do what I tell you to do in my house," Gordon said, and suddenly his hands were on my baby, pulling him from my arms with surprising force. I was so shocked by Gordon's sudden grab that my arms went numb. He had Theo before I could properly resist, his massive hands wrapped around my baby's tiny torso. Theo immediately started wailing louder, terrified by this angry stranger holding him. "This is what happens," Gordon said, holding Theo up at arm's length like he was displaying evidence in a courtroom, "when mothers can't do their job." Then he threw him. Not dropped, not tossed. Threw. My 8-month-old baby flew through the air for what felt like hours but was probably less than 2 seconds. His little body hit the dining room wall with a soft thud that I'll hear in my nightmares forever. He slid down slightly before landing on the hardwood floor. For one horrible moment, there was complete silence. Then Theo's scream split the air, high and terrified and hurt. I dove for my baby, my knees hitting the floor hard enough to bruise. I scooped him up, my hands shaking as I checked his head, his back, his arms, everything. A red mark was already forming on his tiny shoulder where he'd hit the wall. His face was purple from screaming, tears and snot streaming down his cheeks. My baby, oh God, my baby," I kept saying, rocking him against my chest. Everyone sat frozen like we were trapped in some horrible photograph. Francine had her hand pressed over her mouth, her eyes wide. Roxanne stared at her plate like she could disappear into it. Danny's beer bottle was suspended halfway to his lips. Wade had stood up but hadn't moved an inch toward us, his face pale and slack. "Accidents happen to bad mothers, kids," Gordon said, sitting back down and picking up his fork like he'd just passed the salt instead of assaulting an infant. My mind was spinning, torn between rage and terror. I needed to call 911. I needed to get Theo to a hospital. I needed to kill Gordon with my bare hands. I needed to get my children out of this house immediately. The thoughts crashed into each other, making it impossible to move. That's when Colton's small voice cut through everything. Grandpa did that to Uncle Danny's baby, too. The words hung in the air like an accusation. My 7-year-old son, sitting straight in his chair, his Pokemon cards forgotten in his lap, looked directly at his grandfather. "What did you say?" Gordon's voice was dangerous, but Colton didn't back down. Maybe he didn't understand the danger, or maybe he was braver than every adult in that room. "Remember Uncle Danny? When baby James wouldn't stop crying at Christmas. You were crying after, and you told Mom outside that's why you drink, because Grandpa hurt James and nobody stopped him." Danny's beer bottle slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. The amber liquid spread across the hardwood, mixing with the scattered glass. "Shut up, kid," Danny slurred, but tears were already streaming down his face. "You don't know what you're talking about." "But you did say that," Colton insisted with that stubborn honesty only children possess. "You said Grandpa threw James and that's why Aunt Christina left and took James away. You said it was your fault for not protecting him." I stood up slowly, Theo still crying against my chest, though softer now, exhausted from screaming. My legs felt like water, but my voice came out steady. "Is that true, Danny?" Danny was sobbing now, ugly, broken sounds. "It doesn't matter. It was years ago." "It matters," I said, looking around the room at each of them. "How many babies has he hurt? How many times have you all just sat there and watched?" "Stop being dramatic," Gordon said. But there was something different in his voice now, a slight uncertainty. Wade finally found his spine, or at least part of it. "Beth, please, let's just go home. We'll go home and forget this happened." "Forget?" I stared at my husband in disbelief. "He threw our baby against a wall, Wade. Your father assaulted our 8-month-old son and you want to forget?" "He barely touched him," Wade mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "I saw it happen," Colton shouted suddenly, standing up on his chair. "I saw Grandpa throw Theo. He threw him hard." "Why are you lying, Dad? Why do you always lie about what Grandpa does?" The room erupted. Francine started crying. Gordon slammed his fist on the table, making dishes jump. Roxanne grabbed Meredith and pulled her close. Danny laughed through his tears, a horrible broken sound, and I made my decision. I pulled out my phone with one hand while holding Theo with the other. "What are you doing?" Francine gasped. "What someone should have done years ago," I said, dialing 911. "You put that phone down right now," Gordon commanded, standing up again, his full height meant to intimidate. I held the phone to my ear with one hand. Theo clutched against me with the other. 911, what's your emergency?" "Bethany, please," Francine begged, actually getting up from her chair. "Think about what you're doing." "I need to report a child abuse incident," I said clearly into the phone. "A man just threw my 8-month-old baby against a wall. We're at 452 Maple Street in Ridgemont. Please send police and paramedics." Gordon started moving toward me. Wade actually stepped between us, shocking everyone, including himself. "Don't touch her, Dad." "Get out of my way, son." "The baby needs medical attention," I continued to the dispatcher. "He has visible marks from the impact." That's when Roxanne suddenly stood up, her chair scraping back. "Dad threw Meredith, too." Everyone turned to stare at her. Even Gordon stopped moving. "When she was 1, Roxanne continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "At Easter dinner 6 years ago, she wouldn't stop babbling during his prayer. He grabbed her from my high chair and threw her into her portable crib so hard it broke. The side just snapped. I told everyone she fell. I told the pediatrician she fell. I lied to protect him." "You're all crazy," Gordon said, but his voice had lost its power. Hysterical women making up stories. "I have the medical records," Roxanne said, pulling out her own phone. "Pictures of the bruises. I kept everything in case I ever got brave enough to use it." Danny stood up so fast he knocked his chair over. "You want to know why I drink, Dad? You want to know why Christina left me? She didn't leave because I was drinking. I started drinking after she left. She left because she thought I hurt James. Our son had a fractured rib, Dad, a fractured rib at 4 months old, from you. But everyone said I must have done it because I was the one home with him that weekend." "You were drunk," Gordon insisted. "I was sober," Danny screamed. "I was completely sober when I brought James here for Sunday dinner. You threw him into the wall of the garage because he spit up on your uniform, your precious Marine Corps uniform, and Mom helped you clean him up and told me it wasn't that bad. Told me babies are tougher than they look." Francine was sobbing now, her perfect makeup running in streams down her face. I was trying to keep the family together. "What family?" I asked, the dispatcher still on the line. "This isn't a family. This is a nightmare you've all agreed to live in." Colton tugged on my shirt. "Mom, is Theo okay?" "He will be, baby," I said, though I wasn't sure. The mark on his shoulder was darkening into a bruise. "Ma'am, officers are 3 minutes out," the dispatcher said in my ear. "You call them back," Gordon ordered. "You call them back and tell them it's a misunderstanding." "Like Roxanne did? Like Danny did? How many times have your children called for help and then called it back?" Wade was standing between us still, but he was shaking. "Dad, maybe you should sit down." "Don't you dare take her side," Gordon snarled at his son. "I made you what you are. Everything you have is because I taught you discipline and respect." "You taught me fear," Wade said quietly. "You taught me to be a coward. I'm watching my wife protect our baby while I stand here doing nothing, just like I've done nothing my whole life." "Wade, honey," Francine pleaded, "your father loves you. He loves all of us." "This isn't love, Mom," Roxanne said. She had Meredith wrapped in her arms now, the girl crying silently. "Love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't throw babies." I could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. Gordon heard them too. His face went from red to white. "This is what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady despite everything. "The police are going to come. I'm going to tell them exactly what happened. Danny and Roxanne are going to tell them what happened to their children, and you're going to face consequences for the first time in your miserable life." "You're destroying this family," Gordon said, but he sounded smaller now, older. "No," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "You destroyed this family, baby by baby, bruise by bruise, year after year. We're just finally admitting it's already broken." The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights flashed through the dining room windows, playing across the walls where my baby had hit just minutes ago. The police arrived within 3 minutes of my call. 2 officers first, then paramedics, then a detective who specialized in child abuse cases. Gordon tried his tough guy routine at first, standing tall, mentioning his military service twice in the first minute. But it crumbled fast when the paramedics documented the bruise spreading across Theo's shoulder and back. "This is consistent with blunt force trauma from being thrown," the paramedic said, taking photographs. "We need to transport him for x-rays and a full examination." Danny broke down completely when the detective started taking statements. 29 years of secrets poured out of him. He showed them old text messages from his ex-wife, Christina, begging him to admit what really happened to James. He'd saved everything, too afraid to delete it, too ashamed to act on it. Roxanne pulled up medical records on her phone from 6 years ago. She'd photographed Meredith's bruises before covering them up with little dresses. She'd kept the broken crib in her garage, unable to throw away the evidence, but unable to use it either. "Why didn't you report this then?" the detective asked her gently. "Because he's my father," Roxanne whispered, "and everyone acted like it was normal. Mom said all men from his generation were strict. Wade said I was overreacting. I thought maybe I was crazy." Gordon was arrested that night. I watched them put him in handcuffs right there in his dining room, next to the table still set with Francine's china. The turkey sat cold and untouched. The cranberry stain had set into the tablecloth permanently. "This is all a misunderstanding," Francine kept repeating as they led Gordon out. But when she looked at me, holding my injured baby, something in her eyes finally cracked. The pretense she'd maintained for 40 years just dissolved. Wade tried to follow me to the car after Theo and I were cleared to leave the hospital. 4 hours of x-rays and examinations. No fractures, thank God, but deep tissue bruising that would take weeks to heal completely. "Beth, he's my father," Wade said, in the hospital parking lot. "You're destroying my family." "No, Wade, your father destroyed this family years ago. Everyone just agreed to let him." I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Wade chose his father over his children's safety, visiting Gordon in jail instead of coming to Theo's follow-up medical appointments. He hired a lawyer with money his mother gave him, fought for custody he didn't really want just to make me suffer. But here's what changed everything. Danny got sober. Really sober this time. He testified at Gordon's trial, voice steady, tears streaming down his face as he described what happened to James. Roxanne testified too. So did I. Even Colton gave a statement to the Child Advocacy Center, brave and clear about what he'd witnessed. Gordon got 18 months in mandatory anger management. Not enough, but more than he ever thought he'd face. Francine sold the house and moved to a retirement community. She sends birthday cards now, nothing more. Danny is 3 years sober now. He has supervised visits with James, who's 7 and doesn't remember the grandfather who hurt him. Christina came to the trial, sat with Danny, forgave him for not protecting their son the first time. Roxanne went to therapy with Meredith. They're working through it together, learning what real family looks like. She told me last month that testifying was the first time she'd felt brave in her entire life. Wade got standard visitation, but Colton's old enough to refuse to go. The court appointed a guardian to evaluate why. Colton told them simply, "My dad didn't protect my baby brother. How can I trust him to protect me?" But here's what haunts me most. Colton knew. My 7-year-old recognized the pattern that every adult in that room had been ignoring for decades. Children see truth when adults wrap it in excuses. Sometimes the youngest voices speak the loudest truths. Sometimes it takes a baby being hurt for people to finally stop pretending everything is fine. And sometimes the hardest thing isn't leaving. It's understanding that staying was never really an option. Theo is 3 now. He doesn't remember that Thanksgiving, but I do. Every time I see him play safely, laugh freely, explore fearlessly, I remember that silence after he hit that wall, and I promise him silently, never again, not on my watch. The last time Colton asked about his grandpa, I told him the truth. Some people think being tough means being cruel, but real strength, baby, is protecting those who can't protect themselves. He nodded and said, "Like you protected Theo and me?" "Yes," I said, hugging him tight. "Exactly like that." If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it. Someone in your life might need to hear that it's never too late to break the silence. Comment below if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that matter. Thank you for listening.